Okay.
All right, this is an interview at the Days Inn, Hicksville, New York, 25th of June, 2003, approximately 2 o'clock p.m. The interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
I'm Dr. Herbert I. Oshrain. My date of birth is May 16th, 1919. Born in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering military service?
I went to college at City College of New York, dental school, New York University.
Okay. Where did you, let's see, where were you and what do you remember about your emotions and so on when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
When Pearl Harbor occurred, I was in dental school. December 1941, I was in dental school. I was inducted into the service in July of 1942 at Governor's Island.
Do you remember where you were exactly when the day you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, the day I heard about Pearl Harbor was, I was at home, at my parents' home. That was a terrible day. Governor's Island, I don't know what it's called now, but that's what it was then. I was then sent to Rockford, Illinois for basic training. I was there about 6 weeks. Then I was sent to Medford, Oregon. I don't remember how long I was in Medford. But after that, I ended up in California, Indio, California, the Mojave Desert. I joined the 487th Engineers Water Supply Battalion. I believe that was September or October of 1942. I was there. We were supposed to be training for North Africa at that time. But we never did make it to North Africa. I was there until October of 1943. At that point we shipped out. The port of embarkation was New York, and we went over to England. I landed in Liverpool, England, and they sent us to some place in Wales. The weather was terrible. It was cold and damp. That's what I remember about Wales. We weren't there too long, maybe 2-3 weeks. And then we were sent down to Cornwall. That was good. Cornwall was a very nice place. We were very welcomed by the population. It was warm, it was comfortable, and we were in Cornwall until June of 1944. I should tell you that men were in great demand in England. There were very few men. And so for the guys in my outfit, and that was one of my side duties, shall we say, was a special services officer. I was a dentist, but there was very little dentistry to be done. So I took care of the troops. I was called a special services officer in England, and I arranged dances for them and parties and that sort of thing. We were there until June of 1944, and we left England on June 20th. That's D plus 14. We landed in Normandy. The story I tell you about that is I got off the ship and I had to get into the landing ship, climb down a ladder, and I missed a step and almost fell in the water. They caught me and put me back into the boat. Well, we landed and then we were holed up in a field where all of us had pup tents. That was a very bad time because the troops were very nervous. And everybody was armed, and these guys would get out of their pup tent and start firing their guns. So you could easily get shot by one of your own guys. I crawled back into my pup tent. We were there for a little while. That was the Battle of Saint-Lô. And I don't know if you know anything about that battle, but there were hedgerows, which made it very difficult for our troops to get through. And so the battle took quite a while. Our water supply battalion had the mission of supplying water to frontline troops. We generally were about 5 or 6 miles behind the front line. When the battle was over and we were able to move forward, we encountered a farm, and the farmer invited us in, welcomed us in, and offered us some liquor. I was not very used to drinking liquor at the time, and the liquor turned out to be Calvados, if you know anything about that. We called it White Lightning. I took a shot of Calvados, and they had to walk me around the building before I came to again. After that, we moved very slowly. We came to the city of Reims. In English, it's called Reims. In French, it's called Reims. We were quartered not too far from the center of town. And that city is a champagne center. So naturally, we went through the wine cellars, and I acquired a bottle of champagne, which I decided I would keep rather than drink. I kept that bottle of champagne through France, through Belgium, through Germany, back through France, back to the States where I was discharged, back home. We lived in a house that had a stone staircase going up to the apartment on top, and then there was a basement apartment. Well, of course, I had this bottle of champagne, and my mother came out to greet me, and I said, "Mom," and there went the bottle of champagne on the stone staircase, gone after carrying it all the way through Europe. Well, we went through the city of Reims, and we just flew through Paris. We never stayed there. We stopped at a town called Vouziers. That's Vouziers, about 20 miles east of Paris. That was a very good town. The inhabitants were very good to us. myself and the medical officer were the only ones in the outfit who could speak French. And we were quite accustomed to going out amongst the peasants and the farmers, and we'd get tomatoes and cucumbers and other vegetables and eggs, and we'd bring them back to the officers' mess. As a result of our mixing that way, myself and the medical officer got to know the restaurateur in the town. There was only one. And he invited us to a Sunday dinner. And for us that was quite a new experience. Maybe 4 or 5 different kinds of wine. In spite of their occupation, they still managed to do all of this. And it was a great dinner. And of course we were kind of floating and forgot the time when we were to be picked up by a truck to go back to camp. When we woke up, so to speak, we said our very hurried goodbye and ran like hell to catch the truck. Luckily we caught it, and some of the guys in the back of the truck, we were able to run then. I can't run now. Now I'm lucky if I can walk. But we ran and we made the truck. They helped us out of the truck, you know, hands out there. We did that. Around November of 1944, they transferred us from France up to Belgium. And we were quartered in a chateau. Every night a German plane would come over. We called him Goodnight Charlie. He always came over around midnight. Just looking, a small plane. We never thought anything about it. The chateau is quite cold. You know, even though you have fireplaces in a chateau, they don't make for a great deal of warmth unless you sit right on that fireplace. Now I should tell you that I'm Jewish. There were in the headquarters battalion, there were 2 of us, myself and another guy who were Jewish. But really, we really didn't have any problem. I became great friends with many of the Catholic guys. They insisted on taking me to church. And we remained friends for several years after the war. But as things go, you know, you begin to lose touch with each other. There was one guy, Fred Worth, who lived in Chicago. I remember corresponding with him for quite a while. And he must have been, I would say, about 8 or 9 years older than I was. And he died. It was very sad for me. Anyhow, to get back to the chateau, I remember I told you that I didn't do very much dentistry. So I was a special services officer, and then I became a special education and information officer, we were called. And it was my job to get the troops to understand that the Soviet Union was our ally, and therefore we were to be friends with the Soviet Union. And I did this job very well. we had in the headquarters group a guy that I would call a redneck. He was a captain like myself. His name was Van, Captain Van, V-A-N. Big southern guy. He wasn't happy with what I was doing, and he wanted to have me court-martialed. But he couldn't because those were my orders. So that kind of set him back on his feet. He was probably the only one, maybe there were a few others, who was basically an anti-Semitic guy. And he made you feel it, as compared to most of the other guys. Well, in December of 1944, we received an urgent message to evacuate. We were told that the Germans had broken through and we'd better get out of there in a hurry. And a few things happened. I was walking up and down the hall and giving orders to pack up this and pack up that. And the caretaker of the chateau came up to me and said, Monsieur le Capitaine, why are you humming? I didn't know I was humming. Interestingly enough, that habit stuck with me for the rest of my life. While I practiced dentistry, at the chair, I would hum. My son, who took over my practice, also hums at the chair. People would ask me, well, what are you humming? And I never knew what I was humming. Anyhow, getting out of that chateau was kind of chaotic, and when we finally did it, I was in a Jeep with a driver, and of course we hurried and got the hell out of there. And this is kind of unbelievable. Not too long after that, we saw a German tank. We were going in the wrong direction. We had to turn around and go in the other direction. We took, that's my watch, I'm sorry.
Mine does, they do it, I thought it was mine.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
It's 2:30. We took prisoners, and the medical detachment had the we had the job of screening these prisoners. And it turned out that 90% of the prisoners fell into two groups. One, 15-year-olds, and the other, 60-year-olds. There were a few younger guys in between. The Germans had no men. They were really depleted. And I think basically that's why we won the war. We had more men, we had more equipment. Well, as you know, it was a terrible battle. A lot of men lost their limbs because they were frozen. Their feet were frozen. But finally, when the battle was over, we crossed over into Germany. The first town we encountered was a town called Aachen, A-A-C-H-E-N. There was nothing standing in that town. Nothing. It was leveled completely. Animals were dead. Human beings were dead. Everything was dead. And the stench of death was so terrible, it permeated everything. We couldn't wait to get through that place. It was awful. We had very little to do after that as a water supply battalion. And along around April of 1945, the water supply battalion was disbanded. I was transferred to a lumber outfit. I'll never know why, but the Army in its infinite wisdom does things like that. As a matter of fact, while I was in the service, every couple of months I would get a note asking me, where would you like to serve? And I would say I'd like to serve in a base hospital. I never saw a base hospital. I was in the service for 3 years, a little over 3 years, never saw a base hospital. The lumber outfit, we were basically part of the occupation. And we went down into a small town in Germany called Bad Orb. That's B-A-D-O-R-B. 2 words. We were looking for a house to establish headquarters. And as a result, we questioned many of the inhabitants of the town. And we finally found a house, and it was owned by a woman and her daughter. And we asked them, were you members of the Nazi Party? And they assured us they had absolutely nothing to do with the Nazi Party. I think we were there a week or 10 days when we learned that the daughter was the leader of the Nazi youth movement in town. So, of course, we weren't too happy about that. We had a couple of guys in the outfit who were able to speak German. And basically, we made ourselves comfortable. We had very little to do. I was there, I guess, until July. And then they told me I was going home. And they transferred me to port of embarkation in France, Le Havre. I must have been in Le Havre 4 to 6 weeks, just sitting around, doing nothing, shooting the breeze with other guys, waiting to go home. Finally, they told us that depending on what happened, we might be transferred to the Pacific. Well, we were on our way home in August. And of course, you know what happened in August. And as a result, I never got to the Pacific. I was discharged in the middle of August. The trip home took us, I was on a Liberty ship. The trip home took us about 2 weeks. Going there, the trip was much longer. I was on a ship going there called the Brazil. We had to stop 2 or 3 times, literally stop, no motors, nothing going, in order to avoid submarines. That took maybe 3.5 to 4 weeks to get there. But coming back, it was really a nice ride coming back. The sun was out, the waters were calm. I was discharged in the middle of August. I telegraphed my girlfriend, to whom I had been engaged for the last 2 years, we had corresponded through those 2 years. Incidentally, that's kind of a surprise because we had quite a few guys in our outfit who had received Dear John letters. I remember the case of one fellow who began to limp. We just couldn't figure out why he was limping. There was clearly nothing wrong with him. The medical officer said, well, let's put him under sodium amytal, which we did. And that's kind of a chemical hypnotic. And while he was under, he poured his guts out. He received a note from his wife who said she found somebody else and she wasn't waiting for him. And so he developed this hysterical limping. We sent him to a hospital in the rear. I don't know what happened to him subsequently. I imagine he couldn't serve really. Maybe they gave him a desk job of some kind, you know. Anyhow, I was discharged. I sent a telegram to my wife-to-be. At the time, she was in Colorado. She was the air base in Colorado. Do you know that place? Well, I visited it when I was a civilian subsequently. It's a beautiful, beautiful area. And she got a leave of absence. They sent her home. And we were married on September 5th of 1945. We had a honeymoon for a couple of weeks and then she had to go back into the service. But they only kept her another couple of weeks and then discharged her. I found a place to practice dentistry. I had no patience. Things were very, very bad. I remember saying to my wife, gee, if we could only make $200 a month, that's $50 a week, we'd be okay. Luckily, there was a veterans program. It was called 5220. So I got into that program, 5220. $20 for 52 weeks, $20 a week, 52 weeks. It helped. I mean, we had nothing, and it helped. Luckily, we had no children at that point, so my wife was able to work, so we got some income that way. However, after she came back, after she was discharged from the service, she went to Margaret Sanger Clinic to get fitted for diaphragm. They said to her, we're very sorry, you're pregnant. So there we were. She couldn't work much longer. Luckily for me, there was a GI Bill of Rights. And I was not too happy with general dentistry. I wanted to become a periodontist. And with the GI Bill, I was able to go to school part-time because I had a family. At that point, I had a wife and 2 children. I had already been practicing dentistry for 12 years. So I couldn't go full-time. I went to school 3 days a week. On the days when I was at school, I'd leave school at 4 o'clock. I went to school at Columbia, and I lived and I worked and lived in Brooklyn, and it took me, I would say, about an hour and 15 minutes to get home. I would go into the bedroom, set the clock, and sleep for half an hour. Then I'd have something to eat, and I had an office which was directly across the street from my living quarters. So I'd have something to eat, go to the office, and work until 10 o'clock at night, then go back to sleep. Next day was a full day of school, go back to school again. I did that for about a year and a half. The head of the department wanted me to go for a full 2 years, but I said thanks very much, but I can't continue to do this. But I was doing very well, and they voted me onto the staff of the Perio department. And I think that's all you have to know about my subsequent life.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
With the water supply battalion, you said you supplied water to the frontline troops. Where did you get this water? Did you filter water, or
Oh, yes.
so you had all the equipment with
Yes,
you?
we had equipment to chlorinate the water,
Mhm.
filter it, purify it, so on. Oh, yes.
Where did you get the water from? Rivers, streams?
Rivers, streams, wherever, whatever was close by.
How much water were you capable of filtering or cleaning in a day, or you know?
That's something I don't know.
Yeah, I was just curious. What, did you bring it to the front lines in tank trucks?
We had big tankers.
Mhm.
We had big tankers, and that's how we'd get to the front lines. Right.
Okay. I was just curious. We'd never had anyone that talked about that type of unit. Where did you get the materials concerning the Soviets that you produced?
The Army provided it.
Information.
Oh yes, the Army provided everything. It was, I didn't have to do anything. It was all given to me.
Did you ever encounter Soviets during the war?
Never.
I was just curious if you met any and what you felt.
No.
Because a lot of the GIs we've met did not feel, in fact the last gentleman that was in did not have high regards for the Soviets. He met them at the Elba.
I never met them. None. I met Germans, but I never met Soviets. I neglected to tell you one thing. When I was in this lumber outfit, one of the guys transferred into the outfit was a former infantryman who had a lot of medals. He already had a Silver Star and, of course, a Purple Heart. His name was O'Neill. I remember him vividly. At that time, I was about 5'6½". Right now, I think I'm about 5'5". I've shrunk quite a bit. But he was, I guess, about 6'2". Big fella. Anyhow, we became very friendly. And he said, you know, this is the little bit of dentistry that I did. He said, you know, I really need something done for my teeth. So I examined him, and sure enough, he had a cavity in one of his teeth, which I excavated and prepared, and we found a German dental laboratory. I went there, and I waxed up a gold inlay, waxed first, and then poured the inlay in gold, which I got from the lab, and then inserted the gold inlay in his tooth. And he was so gratified, you're so great, Herb. Really, you're so great. He gave me a German Luger as a souvenir. No bullets, of course, just a German Luger. Now, this is New York State. You're not supposed to have a gun. Don't tell anybody.
Turn the camera off.
I still have it. Up there in the closet. You have more questions.
How did you feel about the death of President Roosevelt when you heard about that?
When I heard about that, it was terrible. The people, all the people, thought it was really quite awful. They really felt a very personal loss, and as did I. I had voted for him when I was at home. I was a young guy when I got into the service. I was 23 years old. But I was the oldest one in my family. We were 3 boys. And the middle brother, who was 5 years younger than I was 18 at the time. And his big brother was in the service, so he thought he ought to be in the service. So he immediately enlisted and got into the service. And I showed you this thing about the Battle of the Bulge. He was also in the Battle of the Bulge. He was a very talented fellow. Played the violin. Went to the High School of Music and Art. But then he enlisted. When he got out, he found a girl, and the way things are in life, your wife can affect much of what you do. He had an opportunity to join the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. But she shook her head. She's not leaving this area. And as a result, he never became a professional violinist. He became a dental laboratory technician instead. Quite a different life. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for another question.
You did answer quite a few that we always ask about the 5220 Club and the GI Bill.
Oh.
How about any veterans organizations? Did you join any after?
When I finished, I joined in 1947. 1947, I joined the American Veterans Committee. That did not have a very long life, as you may know. Mm-hmm. However, I met a lot of guys in that organization. We had a great time together. We played ball on Sunday in Marine Park. That's a park in Flatbush in Brooklyn, not far from where I had my office and where I lived. As a matter of fact, my wife, who was a natural athlete, was very annoyed that I was going to play ball Sunday morning while she was at home. Why wasn't she out there playing ball, you know? But we had a ball team, and every Sunday we met, and we had a great time together. And all the guys I knew are dead now. They're all dead. I met, one of the guys I met was a doctor, a general practitioner, and he ran for Congress on the American Labor Party ticket. He didn't make it, as you well know. He was an interesting man. And when he was 52 years old, he became a psychiatrist. He died, he was about 90 90 or 91 when he died. So he was at least 10 years older than I. But I still know the wives of a couple of those guys. They're still alive.
Did you get to see any USO shows while you were overseas?
No, but I got to see Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. Of course, I was all the way in the back up on a hill. The good seats were basically for the enlisted guys. But they were great, and it really was a bit of home. You're ready to cry, you know. But they really were. It really was very, very good.
Okay, well, you brought some things in. Why don't you hold those up, camera?
This is a certificate to the veterans of the Battle of the Bulge, which you can see. I got this certificate through an interesting occasion. I went to a restaurant to have dinner with a few other people, and the man in the restaurant, it was an Italian restaurant, the man in the restaurant, his name was Goldie, and he came around to talk with us, and I said, gee, that's odd that your name is Goldie, you're Italian, aren't you? He says, well, I used to be a caddy at a Jewish golf club, and they told me, well, yeah, we can't tolerate that, you have to be Jewish. So they gave me the name Goldberg, and they called me Goldie. And we became pretty friendly, and we were talking, and got to telling me that he was in the Battle of the Bulge, and I said, so was I, and he told me about this, got an application, and that's how I got this.
That's nice. Oh, you had some photographs too.
Yes, I wanted to show you. This was the photograph of my wife and I at a wedding. She was a sergeant and I was a captain. That made for a tough marriage the first year of life.
Now, what year was that?
That was 1945, 1946.
Okay, got it.
Now, what did she serve with? Did you say?
Which army? We were attached to the First Army.
Well, with her, your wife, was she?
Oh, she was a WAC. She was attached to the Army Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
She was a part of the time. She was in the control tower, directing landings of aircraft.
Okay, do you want to hold that photo up?
Yes, I'd like to hold this up of my wife. Got it?
Got it. Yep.
And finally, I'll show you this one. That's me as a 23-year-old first lieutenant.
I'm getting a little glare. Can you just tilt that back a little bit? Maybe that. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, great. Got it.
Okay. I guess that's it.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
All right. Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome.